Thank you so much, Perry. So our next speaker will be Tony Dale. He is a former Texas state rep, and he's also going to be talking a bit about driving security awareness within an organization. So whenever you're ready, Tony, just present your slides.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you inviting me to be here today. This has been an excellent panel, and very honored to be a part of it. So my name's Tony Dale. I'm the Director of Cybersecurity Business Integration at the Lower Colorado River Authority. I'm speaking to you today from Texas. The LCRA is a public utility, and we've got numerous electric generating power plants and dams, and our corporate structure. So we've got critical infrastructure that we have to secure, and we face the full spectrum of cyber threats, whether it be nation state actors, individual hackers, hacktivists, all that kind of stuff. So we have to secure our workforce against this. And what we really want to do is turn this security training into action. So the things I'm going to talk about today are, how we as cyber professionals can enable the business and focusing on what employees can control. And you've heard some of this on how to use emotion, but I like to say it's think like a hacker. They're really good at using emotion, these social engineers. And how can you do that as well? And then aligning your corporate culture to your brand, and an example of how we recognize people here at LCRA that can help you deliver your message and secure your organization. So when you think about a company, whether it be LCRA or anything else, I like to think of what's the focus of Coke, Ford, and State Farm, well-known brands. At Coca-Cola, their focus is on beverages, right? Mainly. They do other things too, but mostly beverages. Ford makes and sells cars. State Farm wants to sell insurance. And so for the employees of a company like this or any other company, their focus is not on cybersecurity. And that's important for us as cyber professionals to remember, because while we may think cybersecurity is the most important thing, it's really not. The most important thing is enabling your organization to do whatever its core function is. And that's where you're competing with the attention of this main focus. But you shouldn't really compete. You've got to find a way to say, we're the folks that enable the business so that you can sell beverages, you can sell cars, and you can sell insurance. And you have to make security part of how they do these things every single day. And that's really got to be your goal. So don't look at it as competition, but rather enabling the business. And when you become a partner to them so they can do these things, that's when I think you're going to have greater success in your organization. All across the spectrum, different companies use different standards for securing their organization. And if you were to pull out any one of these various cybersecurity standards, you're going to see lots of very technical, very detailed examples of how you should secure a server or set up a firewall and do all these different things. And very few of these things actually have anything to do with that human element that we've discussed today. So you can't, I don't think you can open up any of these and say, what should my people be doing it, or how they should be doing certain things. But you've really got to figure out, how are you going to take what's important to secure the humans and make that part of your culture? These things are just way too technical to give you that answer. And one of the speakers even mentioned today, I think it was our very first speaker, that said, people are just like, I don't even understand what this stuff is. Most people aren't involved in technology. They don't care about it. They don't have the time to think about it or the capacity or the training. So you've got to take this and turning it into something they can use. One of the things I like to do for training is grab them with a story. Now, this is an example of something that's familiar to a lot of people. I think a lot of people have seen the show Shark Tank. You've got Barbara Corcoran, who you see on TV commercials, but also on this show. She was hired at Shark Tank because she's really smart. She's a great business investor, a great mind, but she was recently the subject of a phishing attack. Someone did a social engineering attack against her. They changed an email address so that there was one character that was a little bit different, sent an email to her and her staff, and they ended up transferring $380,000 in a bogus real estate scam, and she lost her money. Now, you heard earlier, it's great when people talk about this kind of victimization because it shows you that it can happen to anybody. And if it can happen to Barbara Corcoran, who's really smart and was hired on Shark Tank because of her intelligence, then it can happen to any of us. But you need to be careful in your organization. I mean, I think it's very important. Perry mentioned this, where you're talking about this is sort of that negative reinforcement piece, right? Where it does stick with people. If you have examples that you can use inside your organization, you might want to anonymize them so that you're not embarrassing people, because people don't want to feel dumb. But I think it is important that you take examples of things that have happened that had an impact on maybe your organization or another organization, and use that as a teaching point without embarrassing people at the same time. This just shows you it can happen to anybody. And but it also brings that familiar part to it that says, hey, I know Shark Tank. I've seen her before. Wow. I can't believe that she was someone that was caught up in a scam like this. And so you can find an example in your organization perhaps and use it to teach. We do that at LCRA. We talk about times where people have gone after us and we've been able to stop them, or sometimes we've had an impact, and we want to use that as a teaching point as well. So again, when you talk about what can a normal end user control, you've got things like, they can't set up a firewall. They're not responsible for networking and all this other technical stuff. You've got to build confidence that your cybersecurity department and your technical IT department is securing the back end. They've got to have confidence in you do that. That's your job if you're in cyber or if you're in IT. But you have to figure out what they can control. And it might be a little bit different in every organization. Perry talked about phishing and trying to prevent that. Well, there's certain things that you're going to want to do to train your people as it relates to phishing. There are some things they can control. Maybe your focus is on how they store passwords, whether or not they're using a password vault, or if you're using passphrases as opposed to passwords. Longer passwords are better passwords, or keeping their personal mobile device up to date, or locking their computer when they walk away. I'm not saying these are things you should train on in your organization, but you need to pick the things that the people have the most control over, explain to them why it's important, and then focus on those things in a way that engages them. And using stories can help with that. And really, this is where you're going to run into a challenge if you're a cyber defender, especially on the communications side of thing, is that you can't get bored of your own message. Culture change is all about communications and over communicating over and over and over again, and say what you're going to say it, and then tell them what you said, and then come back to it again. You might do it in a different way each time, but you've got to hammer consistently on things over and over, because just delivering the message one time doesn't get it across to people. You heard in the introduction that I'm a former state representative. I served on the House Select Committee on Cybersecurity and Homeland Security and Public Safety, but I also had to get elected. And we know on the electoral side of things, typically we had to communicate with someone 7 times through different methods before they started to even remember your name, let alone know what you stood for. And so don't get bored with your own message. Stick with it. But also think about how you deliver your message. This is an example of an advertisement. It has nothing to do with cyber, but here's Michelin tires, and they're saying, what are they saying in this ad? There's so much writing on your tires. This is what social engineers use, just like advertising does, to grab your emotions. I'm a dad. I've got 2 daughters. I look at this and I say, yeah, I don't just want to buy a tire. I want to buy something that is safe, something that's going to protect my family. And that's the emotional appeal that Michelin is getting at in this particular ad right here. They're selling safety. They're not selling tires. But ultimately, they need to sell the tire, right? So they want to get
Hey,
that
Tony,
emotional appeal.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry to break in, but you're actually not sharing your screen right now. So if
Okay,
you,
let me
yeah, if you wanted
share.
to pull up the presentation.
Okay. I apologize because it's showing on my screen that I'm sharing. Let me try it again. Let me know if you're able to see. You should see an ad from Michelin. No?
Yeah, we don't see anything right now. Oh, okay. I think it's working.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
So as I was saying, advertisers and social engineers know this. They want to grab your emotions, and hopefully you see a screen that has a Michelin tire ad, and they're selling safety because they want to sell the tires. All right. So now let me show you an example of a hacker emotional appeal. This is an actual screenshot of a text message I received, and it's a pretty common text message saying, "Hey, we're your bank, and we're going to suspend your account." And they're trying to short circuit your thinking, make you act quickly, and sending you this link right here. And this is totally not legitimate. And I knew that because I don't even have an account with Bank of America. But a lot of people
Tony, I believe that you froze out for a few people. Catherine. Okay, he left the meeting, I believe, so hopefully he'll be back in a moment. His connection was a little bit unstable, so we'll just give him a moment.
Okay, yeah, looks like he's rejoining, so probably be able to
I
get started
apologize. I think I just lost my connection, and it's a Zoom issue. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to reshare my screen, and I do apologize for the technical challenge there. It's my Zoom lost us. So hopefully you can see my screen again.
We
Katie,
don't
if
see it yet, actually.
all right.
Okay, I think it's working now.
Okay, I apologize for that disconnection there. But when I get in front of employees at work, I do ask them frequently, okay, raise your hand if you have kids at home or if you have elderly parents or grandparents that you're concerned about their behavior online or their habits online. And almost every hand in the room goes up. And right there, that you're teaching them about something you want them to do at work, but you're trying to relate it to something that maybe has that stronger emotional connection so that you can say, hey, everything I'm going to teach you here, I want you to go home and teach it to your family to protect them. And that gives them that emotional connection. It opens up their senses and their listening in a different way. And hopefully taking that home and using it so they're not just going to engage at work, but they're going to engage at home. And really, I think this is the way to have your knowledge and your training at work as a fringe benefit. We're going to teach you something here at work and be able to take it home and protect your family. And that's part of that turning that behavior into real action. I think it also matters how you say things. These are real. The top one is a proposed headline we had for a recent article that we did at work. We said phishing scams target Microsoft Office 365. And I changed it to say, no, phishing scams are targeting your username and password. Because on the top one, to me, that's Bill Gates' problem. Someone's going after Bill Gates, Microsoft 365. I don't really care about that. But if me as an end user, someone's coming after my username and password, I'm going to listen a little bit differently to the messages coming across because it's more targeted, more focused. And you're putting that person in a situation where they're saying, well, how does this impact me? So when you think about culture and how you communicate, try and relate it to the people that are impacted, not to the systems. It's just a different kind of approach where you can actually have the rest of the article could say exactly what you want. And you also need to align culture with your brand. So I was trying to find ways to communicate this culture, cyber culture stuff at work. And we've got 5 core values at LCRA, and one of them has to do with a focus on safety. And so I try and relate safety to cyber safety. You can have a real world impact if you do something wrong on the cyber side of things, just like you can do if you're out in a field environment. You heard that we have electric power plants and dams and other critical infrastructure, transmission lines, thousands of miles of transmission lines that we have to secure. And so safety is a big part of our culture. One day I was in an office and I looked in a trophy cabinet and I saw a golden helmet and certificate. And I was like, what is this thing? And as I read the certificate, it talked about how an employee was wearing their helmet as they're required to do, and a large object fell from a height that hit the employee in the head. And they were saved either from death or serious injury by their helmet. Now, they were supposed to be wearing their helmet in the first place, but because they were doing what they were supposed to do, they were protected. Now, this award wasn't just to recognize that employee, because when it got presented to the employee, other employees were trained at the same time. And it was showing that the behavior that they exhibited was not just good for the person that was wearing the helmet, but for everybody else that was involved also. So I looked at this and I said, hey, this is a great way to recognize people for doing basically what they're expected to do in the first place. So I adapted this, and we created here at LCRA what we call our Cyber Defender Award. And phishing, as with many organizations, is a big threat to LCRA. There's one way to stop phishing, and that's to stop using email. But that just doesn't make sense. You're going to have people that need to use email, of course. So we want to recognize when they do things well, whether it be they report a drill, or maybe it's an actual phishing email. So once a month, everybody that reports a phishing email, whether it be a drill or a real one, they go into a pool and we pull a name out of a hat, and we do a random winner for our monthly award. We also give one out quarterly and annually. In addition to the certificate that we present, they also get a gift card with a small cash value on it. But where the real value of this program comes in my opinion, is that we reach out to the supervisor of the employee and say, hey, your employee has been selected to be the cyber defender, and we haven't told them yet. Would you invite us to one of your meetings so that we can present it to them? And then the supervisor invites us to get in front of their employees. I've done these where we've had as many as 125 employees. And then I go, well, hey, since you're inviting me, would you mind if I throw up a slide that talks about our phishing threats here at LCRA? And just give me 5 minutes and I'll get out of your hair. We'll do this thing. And what it turns into is a great training opportunity where we talk to them with real statistics, show them what's really happening at our organization so they understand exactly why we think that this is a valued behavior. And they don't even know they're getting trained, essentially. We do the presentation, we take a picture, and then we recognize the person on our company intranet, and we generally have hundreds of engagements with these online kudos to these employees. And they also will hang these in their cubicles or their offices, and you know that people are going to ask, how did you get that? And that person becomes another champion for you and a trainer. And I think it's been very well received here at LCRA, but it's just a way to amplify or reward for behavior that we expect. And I've had people tell me, that they appreciate the certificate and the recognition more than they do the cash gift cards that we give out in addition to this. And that's a really meaningful thing. And getting that recognition in front of their peers, I think, is really valued by employees as well. So as it relates to culture change, here's one thing I would just say: don't rush it. This is not an overnight thing. Even when you have your executive support, you're taking oftentimes, maybe it's a medium to large organization and try and change behavior. You look at this example, it's not a cyber example, but it is a technology example of how IBM, perhaps got comfortable resting on their laurels. And then within, less than a decade, they were just getting hammered, and they said, hey, we need to do things differently. And they started to change their corporate culture and the way they do business. And they got back on top in a particular business segment. But there's a lot of years in between 1984 and 2013, but you just can't give up. You've got to continue to communicate and just keep going forward. So don't give up, and find your internal champions, whether they be an executive or maybe it's your cyber defender that is maybe your frontline employee. So I think the key things, again, I want to reiterate is remember that you just enable the business. You're not the main focus of the business. Cyber is not what you do as an organization. It's something else. Even if you're a cybersecurity awareness training organization, for example, or you're a cyber defender that goes in and helps clean up for incident response, you still have to sell those services to people. So that's your main function, is making money. And that's where your employees are going to be focused. work on what you can control, think like a hacker, and recognize your people. And even though the Chinese like to hack a lot in the United States, they've got a really good proverb of the best time to do it is now. So it's time to get started. And I think I would commend all of you that are young, trying to discern what you want to do in your career, that you're thinking about cyber, because there's lots of opportunities on the technical side and on the training side as well, and culture and communications. And it's a really exciting place to be. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And if we have time, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, we do have a few questions. One from the audience is asking, Tony, what was it like working on cybersecurity in the Texas legislature, and how did you get support for cybersecurity there?
Yeah, well, one of the ways we got support is that we knew that we had incidents that were happening, and we were, I mean, it's not a good story, right? But we were kind of lucky near the end of one session when we were working trying to get this bill across the finish line, because I co-authored the state's cybersecurity policies that we have in place now, our laws. And it was probably the day before we had the bill on the floor, somebody hacked into Dallas's tornado sirens and set off tornado sirens all across the city, which inundated 911 centers, people trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And there was some indication that it resulted in a delay in people that needed medical assistance from getting ambulances to be dispatched to the place that they needed service. So we had a very fresh example, real world, that happened just before this went on the floor. It can be very challenging because there's all different kinds of age ranges when you talk about members of the legislature. It tends to be on the more senior side of things. I was in my 40s, and I was one of the younger members that were. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was definitely younger. I was not near the older side of the spectrum at that time. But our committee was made up of mostly people that I would say were digital natives, and we understood it well. But we also knew we had to communicate to members that were. We had some that didn't have smartphones, some that had never sent a text message in your life, and we had to explain to them why this was such a big deal and why it was important to get it right. But the good news is many legislators are, really into news and current events. And when things like the Dallas incident happen or other hacks, they realized that something needs to be done. And they trusted our group on that cybersecurity committee to bring them a solution that was going to make sense.
Okay, so one question that was actually asked previously, but I still think you could speak to it, is how do we make sure that we're hiring folks who don't want to harm the organization?
Yeah, so there's different kinds of insider threats, right? There's the ones that are unintentional, where they do something just out of ignorance, and then there's some that are doing things maliciously, on purpose with intent. It is critical to do thorough background checks on people, but you also have to. I go back to I was an Army officer back in the 80s and 90s. We had a term that Ronald Reagan made famous of trust but verify. Check all the background checks, do the reference checks, take that seriously. And then even when people are in your organization, you have to be cognizant that you could potentially have insider threats, whether it be for financial purposes or espionage, things like that. You have to keep an open mind that these things can happen. You shouldn't be 100% paranoid, but at the same time, you do have to be aware that this is a real issue. But that's where you can use your technical means to make sure that people aren't leaving back doors. So that's why you do penetration tests on yourself. And you just have to have an avenue for employees to be able to go to someone they trust if they have concerns about insiders. It's a real threat. You've seen news articles about this, but you just have to be aware that it can happen and have a program in place where maybe you can catch these things before it becomes too much of a problem. It's a challenging issue. They obviously try and hide themselves on purpose because they don't want to get caught.
We have another audience question asking, what sort of reactions have you gotten from the people who won your Cyber Defender Awards?
Well, we training because he said he went home and he trained. It was really important. And, when you hear things like that, that's what you want, because they're going to take those skills they learn at work and use them at work, but they're also helping their family. And I think that's some of the most rewarding things that we see. We also do Cyber Defender Awards if someone does something that is cyber related, that maybe, and they're not a cybersecurity expert, right? They say, hey, we
Tony, I don't know if you can hear me, but okay, I think he left again. So we'll wait for him to reconnect, and then I think we'll ask him to repeat the first part of the question or his response to it. Catherine, has he rejoined?
I just did, and I apologize that I've got some connection issues today, but yeah, I think the most rewarding thing is when employees say that, hey, I took what I learned at work and I used it at home, and then that way they're really doing it at work too, and that's a big deal. But they do love the recognition from their peers. I think that's an important aspect.
Great. And so another question is just, do you think that your awareness programs are having an effect? And if you could talk a little bit about that.
I do. We hear from employees frequently. I know that there's employees that reach out to me when they see something that's suspicious. We've had behavior changes that are noticeable at work, where we've trained particular departments that maybe we think are might have a heightened threat, and we've seen them thwart attacks, and that maybe a year ago or 6 months ago.
Okay, I guess we'll see if he rejoins. But we are nearing the end of our time, so probably after this he can finish up the one question if there's time, and then we'll thank him and introduce the panel.